A very warm welcome back from the weekend, everyone. I am Melissa Enoch here at the FMDQ studios in Lagos.
I am Grace Agbaragu, and we thank you all for joining us at this time. It's Monday, the 3rd of November.
All right, let's begin your news now in Zimbabwe, where the country has introduced new ease of doing business reforms for wholesale and retail sector aimed at cutting red tape and lowering regulatory costs for entrepreneurs. The reforms consolidate multiple licenses into one, reduce fees, and cap small business license costs at $500 US. Key changes include the removal of 11 licenses, merging retail and wholesale permits, lower effluent and property fees, and the scrapping of the MCAZ veterinary permit. The initiative builds on earlier reforms in livestock, tourism, and transport, and is designed to boost SME growth, job creation, and formalization, advancing Zimbabwe's Vision 2030 goals. The annual Africa Financial Summit, AFIS 2025, co-hosted by the International Finance Corporation, formally opens today in Morocco. The summit brings together public and private sector leaders to discuss how innovation, inclusion, and resilience can drive Africa's financial transformation.
There is a lot of bottlenecks. Three of them I would like to speak about this morning is maybe scale, the institutional framework, and also the base case that our economy offers. First one is the scale, and I think that Mokhtar just mentioned this $1 billion. And it's the same thing even for African investors. They need scale, and because the markets are fragmented, if they don't find scale at home, they will look for it elsewhere. And none of our stock markets has more than 100 listed company. I mentioned some number. We use different currencies. We cannot trade together directly, despite the fact that we have very strong success stories, and EcoBank is one of them. But I think we need this interconnection at scale. Then the institutional framework, and I'm going to say a statement and regret it immediately after. I think that the institutional framework will push much more for the pension funds, the bankers, and the savings to go for the sovereign bonds, and maybe less incentives. I'm not just talking about tax incentives for private money, long-term money, and more risk. So I think that, and there is so many regulators here that maybe should be also looking for regulation that helps this money to be long-term. And then we need, as policymakers, to have, I would say, the house in order, macroeconomic stability.
In earnings news, UBA has reported a 10.5% year-on-year drop in earnings per share to 13.56 naira for 9 months 2025, partly due to higher outstanding shares, even as profits after tax rose 2.3% to 537.53 billion naira on lower taxes. Interest income grew 10.1% to 1.98 trillion naira, driven by investment securities and loans to banks, while interest expense jumped 16.3% to 808.72 billion naira. Non-interest income fell 28.9% on lower FX gains, and operating costs rose 4.2%, pushing the cost-to-income ratio to 57.1%. Profit before tax declined 4.1% to 578.60 billion naira. In Namibia, the government has briefed the media on the successful redemption of its $750 million Eurobond, a major step towards strengthening the country's debt position and maintaining macroeconomic stability. Let's take excerpts.
If you look at our economic growth, so in 2024 we had about 3.7% growth. It's going to moderate this year. That's about 3% in 2025. The reason of this moderation is basically because of weak global demand, one, and softer manufacturing sector, particularly in the meat side and diamond processing side. That's why you see a drop from 3.7 in terms of growth. But it's well above 3% that we have got. So we expect growth to pick up again in 2026 to around 3.9 level. So that's on the growth side. On the inflation side, we are redeeming our bond in a very disinflationary period in Namibia. So if you look at the first 8 months of 2025, we had headline inflation averaging about 3.6%.
I stand before you to announce the successful redemption of Namibia's second Eurobond. This redemption, valued at $750 million US, represents the largest single debt maturity in our nation's history. It is a testament to our unwavering commitment to fiscal discipline, strategic foresight, and prudent debt management. As you might recall, Namibia issued its first Eurobond in 2011, and that was for US $500 million, approximately 7.5 billion Namibian dollars. And that was secured at an interest rate of 5.5%.
In Angola, the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, AAMFI, and ORDER NEPAD have announced the creation of the AAMFI Infrastructure Financing Facility to fast-track Africa's infrastructure development. The declaration of intent was signed during the Luanda Infrastructure Financing Summit held under the theme Cutting the Cost of Capital, Financing Africa's Infrastructure in the Presence of African Leaders, Financial Institutions and Private Sector Representatives. The Energy Summit begins today in Abu Dhabi, UAE. Global energy leaders, including ministers from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, as well as CEOs from ADNOC, ExxonMobil, and other major firms, are gathered for ADIPEC 2025 to discuss the future of energy, technology, and sustainability.
And here are the facts. Electricity demand will keep surging through 2040 as power for data centers grows fourfold. 1.5 billion people move into cities, and more than 2 billion air conditioners come online. Aviation will also take off, with the global airline fleet doubling from 25,000 to 50,000. And as a result, renewables will more than double by 2040. LNG will grow by 50%. Jet fuel will grow by more than 30%. And oil will stay above 100 million barrels per day beyond 2040, increasingly used not just for mobility, but more and more for materials and petrochemicals. This all adds up to something far more complex than a single path energy transition. What we're talking about here is reinforcement, not replacement. In fact, what we're really talking about here is energy addition. And everyone and everywhere, when they look, the signal could not be clearer. Energy equals jobs. Energy equals growth. Energy equals competitiveness. And energy equals intelligence.
Finally, on news now, FMDQ Group has announced that the prestigious 8th edition of its Gold Awards will hold on November 7, 2025 in Lagos. Organized under FMDQ's Gold Agenda, focusing on global competitiveness, operational excellence, liquidity, and diversity. The event celebrates outstanding achievements in Nigeria's financial markets. Now in its 8th year, the awards honor individuals and institutions for excellence, innovation, and integrity, with winners selected through a transparent, independently verified process. I am Melissa Enoch, and that's it for News Now this Monday. The show returns shortly with Grace Agbaragu at the FMDQ Archives Room for our Markets Round. Do stick around. Welcome back to Money Moves. Let's now go over to Grace for today's markets review. Hello there, Grace.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's track the market's first session of the week, starting off with the equities. The African equities opened the week on a mixed note. In West Africa, the NGX All-Share Index and the BROVM closed on the negative, down 0.25% and 1.10% respectively. In contrast, the Nairobi Securities Exchange rose 0.99% to 190.15. In North Africa, the EGX 30 advanced 1.42%, leading regional gains, while Johannesburg Stock Exchange slipped 0.21%. Let's do a quick round on some of the Pan-African currencies. The rand weakened 0.14% to 17.30, while the naira appreciated 0.23% to 1,442 naira 46 kobo. The Egyptian pound edged 0.05% higher to 47.27, but the CFA franc slipped 1.38% to 569.54. The Moroccan dirham firmed 0.40%, while the Kenyan shilling was slightly stronger at 129.30. Let's switch into the commodities data deck, beginning with energy prices. Brent crude eased 0.06% to $64.73, and WTI inched down 0.07% to $60.94. Natural gas rose 2.21% to $4.21, while Arabian gasoline slipped 0.25% as of 12:53 GMT. And finally, two metals prices. Gold gained 0.62% to $4,021.10, while copper rose 0.15% to $5.09. Platinum added 1.38% and aluminium advanced 1.19% to $2,918.34 as at 12:54 GMT. And that's our Money Moves markets today. Back to you, Melissa.
Grace, thank you very much for those market updates. And that's it on Money Moves this Monday. From me and the rest of the team here at the FMDQ studios, we say thank you very much for watching and bye for now.